Hey guys, welcome to the Manufacturing Virtual Mug. We're doing our summation of what happened in July. Again, we've got Michael Tucker, who needs no introduction because he's basically on every single Marketo user group from the conversion store, and me, Warren Stokes, from Neva Limited as a consultant. So our group values then, so what are we, let's get this bit done first, which is, what are we gonna, and Michael, do you want to go over the group values and what we're here for?
Absolutely. So, just so everybody knows, I mean, this is really common. You see this in a lot of Marketo user groups, and this is what I use in mine, is that this is a safe space to learn. So, open to talk about. There's no such thing as a dumb question or comment here. It's collaborative, so we're all going to be chipping in on the conversation here. You have five wonderfully talented Marketo experts that'll be on this call and chipping into the conversation. And just note that we all work for different businesses, but none of us are here from a sales perspective. It's all purely about learning and making the environment and the experience meaningful for the people that are watching and participating in the recording of this presentation. And the idea here is that you get an understanding of the different Marketo user groups that are happening around the internet in this particular month, so that you can enjoy and participate or watch the recordings and maybe attend one of the upcoming ones. And another reason why you should do that is because they're fun and enjoyable, and they are professional value-added activities. So you get a good balance of both. You probably hear the odd joke and some witty banter that'll come out of this conversation. And that is, if you've never been to a Marketo user group, very much what you can expect to see when you attend an event. So those are our values, and we look forward to seeing you at one of the events, and that's sort of the code that we sort of live off of as we're doing this presentation today.
Cool, thanks, Michael. And then on to those five fresh faces, aside from me and Michael, we have Jay. Let me just read what you wrote in the description. Jay Schonwalder. That's correct, right?
You nailed it.
Yeah, nailed it. And then we've got Trent Cross, and we've got Adele Miller. All of these people have a variety of different skills, different skill sets. Jay, who's the Milwaukee MUG leader, has been since January, has a huge background in Marketo. We've got Trent, the consultant from Revenue Pulse, Salt Lake City MUG leader, Marketo champion alumni. Adele, just a list of bullet points of just different things that she's done. And by the way, if you haven't seen her experience, the Experience Makers presentation, I thought it was awesome. Even though Adele called it basic bitch, were her specific words that she said to me. So
thanks for that.
these were your words, Adele. I'm just saying that. Our topics for today then, because I'm sort of light on content for the mugs that happened in July. I think it gets busier only around the September time, but we also had a look at the Adobe Experience Makers and what to make of the presentations around that, and also some of the product updates which will be coming shortly. So they are very open to being part of the Marketo user groups. So you'll probably see some of that creep into some of the future August user groups, maybe in September as well. I know the EMEA one has one in September. And then what's coming next for August. So that's our topics for today. So on to, and while I remember, we also have we will upload this recording to the YouTube site. So Michael has kindly put a link, theconversionstore.com/video, and that will just basically take you straight to YouTube, because Adobe don't have a function. Well, they do have a function. I think everyone's starting to upload their videos up onto the bevy, but not everyone's doing that yet. We're trying to just make it basically easier for people to watch the recordings and catch up on stuff, really.
Right. So it's conversionstore.com. I don't have that in there, but /video.
Yeah.
And this will help to pass the video between from one spot to the other. So you can keep watching a playlist, and you can binge watch if you're done with Netflix.
Yeah, I will just listen to it in the background, because some of them are just quite, like, I know that almost everyone doing the virtual Marketo user groups now are just sort of listening in the background, and sometimes you can hear typing, which is always a compliment to how interesting your content is. Cool. Starting off then on our Marketo user groups this month. So we, starting with July 2nd, I think was the first one in July. We had Kyle McCormick on the spring cleaning webinar series. Has anyone been on the spring cleaning webinar series? I mean, I did a presentation in which I made a cocktail, so that one doesn't count. But I know Kyle is a little bit more detail orientated and probably more technical than I am. So, Michael, did you go on that one?
I caught the beginning of it, yeah, and partway through it, I think on some of the recordings. And if I remember correctly, what Kyle had kind of mentioned too is that he had experience on the consulting side and on the client side as well too. So, getting a chance to see how they create some of the different operational programs to be able to clean up their database from that perspective is the piece that I remember from it. But this whole series is, it's on the YouTube channel. It's on Andy Caron's YouTube channel as well too, and it's something that Chicago's been doing throughout the summer for the Chicago MUG. So it's a good piece to be able to catch up, if for nothing else, and to see how other people are doing their data hygiene, and to be able to kind of compare that with what you've got. That's what I got from it. Was anybody else on there?
Yeah, I wasn't on the live session, but I did watch the recording afterward. And I thought that was a really good one. That was actually one of the mugs that I wanted to highlight for this month. I thought Kyle did a great job showing some like actual examples of how to do things in Marketo, in real time. And it was basically, he kind of covered a lot of tips and tricks, and we see those kinds of presentations and blog articles all the time, and I just thought he did a really good job of uncovering some not so obvious ones. I mean, if you get a chance to go and watch that recording, I definitely recommend it. I thought he did a really good job specifically talking about his philosophy on naming convention. I don't know that his philosophy would work for everyone, but I think just seeing the thought process that went into it is really, really beneficial. He talked about the kind of, it's probably now infamous line break token that I think Sanford actually kind of came up with. I remember when I first discovered that, I think probably like my first or second year using Marketo, I felt like just this like expert hacker figured something out like that I wasn't supposed to know. And if you haven't used that, it's so helpful. Probably the biggest or the most common use case is like if you have a notes field that you're syncing over to your CRM like Salesforce. Marketo doesn't really make it easy to include line breaks when you're changing data values in a flow step. And so, those notes fields can get kind of busy and hard to read on the CRM side. And this line break token makes it a lot easier to do that, which makes, the notes just that much easier for sales to go through and read. So if you haven't seen that, I definitely recommend checking that out. But yeah, that was a good one. And I mean, Chicago just constantly puts out really good content. So shout out to Brooke and Andy and Renee down there.
I was just thinking that.
Well, I was going to also say there's so much great content in that Chicago recording that you can get on the mug.marketo.com. That is because I looked at all the different content that he had output. So even though it was called Mr. Clean Your Marketo Activities, it was actually like tips and tricks. He went straight into marketing activities. He just pulled up the naming convention calculator. So all of those different things. So yeah, that's a great one to call out. Anyone else sort of have a comment on that one, or because I know Kyle is great anyway, but
I was just going to say, yeah, agreeing with the line break. I actually only used it, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I used it for the first time about 1.5 years ago. And we have a custom CRM here at IFS, so it's quite different how we sync our data over to like the traditional setup. But to have that line break, it literally blew my mind, and it made me look like a wizard, because I was like, yeah, that's fine. We can do notes with breaks in. It's not, everything looks great. And it really did transform everything for sales. So, massive appreciation as always to the legend that is Sanford for putting that up there so we can actually use his tools and pretend we know what we're doing.
It's my common note in a lot of these meetings is, what would Sanford do when we're trying to debug a lot of these? We talked about the happy hour a little bit later on, but a lot of these open sessions that people have to Marketo user groups. For those of you who can't, there's no summit this year, obviously, like in person one, but you'll see a lot of open discussion sessions and champion office hours that are coming into the mix now, where you can kind of bring some of your questions. The happy hours are a good spot to be able to do that as well too. And so, or the New York Marketo User Group, they do a weekly office hours that Sanford himself and Inga Romanoff are running, so that you can ask some of those questions to get into things. I think the one last piece that I kind of want to mention here about Kyle McCorrick's session too is just a general shout out to Palo Alto Networks, because they're a perennial presenter at a lot of the summit sessions. And I don't know that I've seen Kyle specifically in one, but I have almost always been to a Palo Alto Networks summit session and have always walked away with good tips from those folks. So, I mean, you could say the same thing about Revenue Pulse and what Andy's doing and that group, but, there's some really good contributors that are in the community that are there from the kind of the corporate world that are also really helping to produce a lot of great content to share with the rest of us. So we're all, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, no, we're kind of spoiled for choice, I guess, in terms of content sometimes. Well, I say content, but in terms of the people that are able to give over their expertise. Like I always realize how much I've still got to learn from Marketo when I listen to presentations like that. I'm like, oh, God damn it. Like, I need to go back and revise.
Yeah, there's always going to be something.
Every day's a school day.
Well, yeah. Speaking of which, I never learnt French, and with the next couple of mugs I want to mention is for the French speakers. We actually had 2 French-speaking mugs. I think was it the Montreal? Was that was the first one? And we also had the French mug that was on the 9th of July. So that one had Chloe Pott presenting, who is current Marketo champion. They present on digital events. So any French speakers, I actually tried to translate that. I tried Google Translate. Let me read you what it said. It's just, oh God, this is. Yeah, I know. It was like for about 7 years, and also use a bit of sport on the autopilot corner expert psychiatrist times. So I couldn't obviously listen to that, but I did actually try using Google Translate. So I won't be trying that again. But for any French speakers, there's been 2 this month. There's also the Munich Marketo User Group that was also on the 9th of July. There's no recording for that, but this was actually their first virtual one. They think they've got another one in September, so that's with, I think, Brit, and they focus this time on event marketing and on 24. But they have quite a bit of kind of Q&A there, so any German speakers was worth picking up on the next one on that. And then Salt Lake City, July 15th. Trent, that's your one, right?
Yeah, that's the one that I infamously lead on occasion. So
Infamously, yeah. I didn't manage to catch that one. Did anyone else? I know that you're on the call, Trent, so you're going to judge me, but yeah, I didn't catch that one.
That's right. I won't judge it, so it's okay. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I attended it because actually it's one of the mugs I lead. So it was good. We actually had Andy Karen, who actually came in and talked as kind of a guest speaker there, talking about Marketo Nurture programs. It was actually really good. Actually, it was, considering it was July, when we were meeting face to face. Normally we take July and August as kind of big travel months for a lot of people here in the Utah area and stuff. And this time we decided to do a virtual one, and we had probably, I don't know, about 30 people in attendance, which is great. But anyway, so Karen, Andy took us from kind of walking through nurture programs, from your basic email programs all the way up to pretty, not really fully intense engagement programs and streams and stuff, but talk about the whole structure and process and how you migrate and how you can advance from one point to the other, and how you go from email programs to default programs to events, and then how you can actually start embedding those into engagement streams and how engagement streams work and the processes and transitions and the various types of reporting elements along those lines. So I think it was very good. I mean, if somebody really wanted to understand kind of how do I do more with my Marketo instance other than just, hopefully more than just default program or email mass and blast, trying to get into the engagement programs is really, really good stuff, and great presentation material out there. We did record it, so it's on the YouTube channel, and I thought it was really good. I mean, I learned a couple of things, you know, and going back to what Dale's talking about, right? It's always a school day, right? So it's yeah, you know, you're always learning things all the time, right? And sometimes you don't learn things until you say, oh, you know, I probably need to implement that one, or hey, it came across an opportunity, and so.
Yeah, you know, I want to jump in on that a second because I caught the first part of that, and I've heard Andy present on this a couple of times actually, and what I really like about Andy's presentation on these things, there's a lot of meat to talk about in engagement programs across the board, and you know, having worked with Andy on a project before, he has a very methodical way of kind of going into these presentations and structuring them so that it's paced so that you can follow it. And if you haven't used some of the features, maybe you built an engagement program, but they're all done using emails and you're not using nested programs into it. Or maybe you're, you know, not using tokens inside of your engagement programs, or maybe, you know, you haven't thought about some of the ways that you use, you know, trigger smart campaigns inside of it. It's a good piece to watch, even if you haven't watched it before, to kind of go back and sort of see how other people structure it, right? We've had a couple of threads that are in the community where you say, well, this is how I do, you know, this is how I add people to streams. This is how I move people around. I use transition rules. I don't use transition rules. This is what I use for cadence. This is what you might want to use for cadence. And I feel like the way that, you know, he's got a very calm demeanor that going into a lot of these things that really, you know, especially as a consultant, when you're working with clients, right, it's important to be able to have a good grasp of the content, but then to be able to communicate that in a way that other people can understand that aren't familiar with that content. You know, that's a big plus. And I think that's something that you know, we're lucky to have somebody like that in the community to be able to share knowledge like that, and obviously with your group.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of those things, sorry, Jay, but I mean, it's just that whole point, right? I mean, people start to build out the programs and stuff. I mean, you know, in our user group in Salt Lake, and I first across all the other user groups, right? You get various types of people, history, experience, expertise in regards to using Marketo, right? From people that are brand new to Marketo, who've been using it for 8-10 years plus, right? And all sorts of expertise across the board. And so sometimes people really don't know how to move things around a little bit, or kind of how to go to the next phase, the next step in their journey. And I think, you know, the engagement programs and nurture programs and stuff are one ways for people to really help them to kind of level up to the next point, right? How to move things to the next perspective, right? I mean, without a lot of heavy lifting. I mean, you start talking about, you know, Kyle went talking about data management, cleanup, and hygiene and stuff, right? It's just, you get sometimes these blank stares, and it's like, oh crap, where do I start from, right? Okay, I got my own subscribers, but then what do I do, right? But as with nurture programs, it kind of makes sense a little bit, right? And there's all sorts of different ways to approach it, and I think that's the beauty of Marketo, right? It's just kind of, there's different ways to approach it. And, you know, as Jay mentioned, in regards to how Kyle talked about, you know, how he liked his naming convention, you know, it's a great, and I saw that, it's a great way to do things, a great opportunity to say, okay, how do I do this if I've never done it before? But it's not necessarily the right way or the wrong way, or if one's good for one company or the other, right? I think there's different facets along those lines, but having that base foundation is really important to go forward. I think that's really kind of what Andy brought to bear on that. Is like, that's why people are so engaged and interested. So anyways.
Yeah, Jay, you're just down the line there in Milwaukee from Chicago, right? You're just a quick train ride away, right?
Yeah, that's right. Probably not hopping on the train anytime soon, but yeah.
Probably not, yeah.
Probably stop at the borders, right? So.
Yeah, we don't need to get into it, but they're actually have some precautions at the Wisconsin border right now. So, yeah, strange times, needless to say.
You've had a chance to do some work with the Chicago mugs as well too. Do you guys get to collaborate a fair amount with the different topics that you're covering respectively? Does that happen?
Yeah, I wouldn't say like we have like a regular collaboration cadence, but you know, Kelly and I, we run the Milwaukee Mug. Both of us know, you know, Andy and Brooke pretty well. Andy's come up to Milwaukee to present for us before, which is definitely a treat. So yeah, it's really good to have them so close for sure.
Nice. I want to jump back to just for a quick second, if I can, just to kind of touch base on the Montreal and the French one for a second too. I love the translation, Warren. I kind of noticed to me that they're talking about GDPR legislation on that presentation, and it was interesting to see that, you know, there's a Montreal, Canada mug, but the presenters for that mug are in France, are Arthur and Chloe, who are the mug leaders for the French virtual mug and for the Paris mug as well too. And so it's kind of neat to see the collaboration from language to language across the pond. And I also think it's kind of neat to be able to talk about kind of what is you know, we've all been on a thread before. I kind of made an introduction to both of those groups and kind of saying, you know, who else is in the community that speaks French? And it's interesting to have that conversation about kind of language preferences that have come up. And I think there's some content that will be coming up into the fall about, you know, I lived in Canada for a long time. So when you're in a country that has more than one official language with it, like Switzerland, you know, how do you handle some of those preferences and the storing of that data? And you know, that kind of ties in a way to GDPR, because that's personal data that you're storing about individuals as well too, and so your overall governance. So that could be a really intriguing session to watch the recording of the Montreal session, because you have the minds, you know, that group's led by a lot of the Marketo consultants, and you also have people that are on both sides of the pond, of the Atlantic Ocean, you know, talking about how they handle some of this data in their respective Marketo instances, and the type of commerce and communications that happens there. So that's a good one to catch for that reason too.
If you speak French, as Google Translate has kindly alluded to. So just on that. And then that's good. That's good. It's a good point actually on the collaboration. I mean, everything is still virtual as well, which I've noticed. No one has done any face-to-face sessions, even though technically I think, Adele, you can do the London one now technically, can't you? Or not quite? Or I don't really understand.
I don't think I could actually attend it in person though, because Manchester's on lockdown again, so I'd have to be virtual.
Yeah, we're doing localized lockdown, but like Jay said, we're probably not going to get into that because that's the least interesting news and stuff that's happening in the world at the moment. Looking at the next kind of mugs that we've got here, we had the Seattle mug on the 16th of July, which was actually my birthday. But
hey, happy birthday!
Yeah, it was. So we'll gloss over that age, but they had ribbon. And I think like they had ribbon come and present on the automated incentive rewards, which I think is similar. I've not used. Has anyone used ribbon, or did anyone get a chance to go to that presentation?
Trenton, you had them on with you a couple of times.
Yeah, I did not go to the one in Seattle. Yeah, so Seattle, I've been on a couple of them before in the past, and it's pretty much more of a conversational type of meeting and discussion amongst the groups and the attendees for that most part. They kind of share it's almost kind of like a champion hours, right? It's kind of like a Marketo hour. You kind of bring your problems and challenges, and people just kind of work on those. This is the first I saw that they actually had somebody outside of just the attendees participate. So ribbon, and we actually had ribbon in Salt Lake, and it was a really good presentation. It provides some insights in regards to they can provide really gift cards, digital gift cards to for your marketing efforts across the board, right? Obviously, in these interesting times, from the standpoint, you really can't attend places, but you provide incentives across the board for either registrations, attending, drawings, giveaways, things of that nature. So they integrate with SurveyMonkey. I know they also have a webhook into Marketo, so that all kind of can connect from that perspective. They also mentioned that you could actually kind of, if you have your budget, let's say $100, and you can actually then select, okay, how many people, what type of cards you want people to get. You can actually really focus on a certain type of deliverables along those lines, or you can open up to everything that they have available, that they have options to, that they can deliver from that standpoint. And the nice thing about that is that they also say that if you have a $100 budget, but only 8 people respond for $10 gift cards, you're only out $80 net to $100, right? And so there's some of the values along those lines. But I thought with kind of the integration pieces, it was actually pretty good. And of course, everybody who attended the Salt Lake event, they all got a nice $10 gift card from Ribbon. So that's kind of a bonus, as a sponsor. So can't complain about that.
You know, one of the things that I've seen too on that, I think, just kind of foreshadowing to the Adobe Experience Makers presentation, that I think Adobe and Marketo use some of that method of communicating as well too, to send out gifts in advance. So for all the marketers that are watching this, and you're at home and you're thinking, how am I going to use this? Actually, in a lot of ways, this is very valid for you to be able to use as a communication channel. It's a good way to be able to kind of, if they send in, information to their home address or to their office address or what have you, right? It's an extra touch point, right? That you can actually send something tactile. How many of us have had swag over the years from Marketo and different groups, right? And what, how much more motivated are you to be able to attend a session after you get a piece like that, and how much more affinity do you have with a brand because you've received that piece?
Yeah, no, sorry.
I was going to say, my first question is always, does it work in a mirror? Sorry, Adele, what were you?
I was just going to say a nice use for that could be something that a lot of companies that I've been talking to have been doing, which is sending out a gift card based off of registration and saying, get yourself a drink, here's £25 to Amazon, get a couple of bottles of wine or a nice bottle of wine delivered to your house, and you can just sit there and smash through it. You're more likely to go because you don't want the guilt of drinking someone else's wine, do you? So that would be a nice use, especially with us all stuck in our houses.
Boy, will you make an interesting presenter after one of those bottles too, huh?
Next London
Pace
mug.
yourself.
Even more incentive.
What's that?
Even more incentive.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've never found any of those work it really that well in a mirror, but maybe just me, because that's always my first question, because I was looked at things like Reach Desk and stuff like that. But, yeah.
And I think Ribbon, I don't quote me on this one, but I think Ribbon said they also work in EMEA too as well, right? Because I think we had a couple people ask about that, because they have worldwide organizations here. So anyway, so I thought it was quite interesting. But yeah, for all the marketers who might be listening to this, definitely something to look into, and maybe a little bit of a twist on your webinars and your virtual events these days to incent people to, as attendees, not just to register, but to attend as well. And so I thought it was actually pretty good. Yeah.
And then on the same day as well, we had the Houston MUG. That's with Amanda hosting, I believe.
Yes.
But then also Chiara presented on that, and she's a good speaker. She's a great speaker, actually. And she presented on collecting actionable data for webinar programs. And that's another one that I didn't get a chance to attend, but I know Amanda's always a great host, been part of her user groups before. She's very, very lively on the presentation. So it's just great and entertaining. So did anyone attend the Houston Marketo User Group?
I watched the recording. I unfortunately didn't attend it live, but it was really good. I mean, yeah, I agree. I think that was the first time I had ever heard Chiara present. She did a great job. And I think, there's so much content out there about A/B testing, right? And that's basically what she focused on, but she did a great job putting it within the context of virtual events or webinars. And so she gave, some really, really good, very specific examples of certain things you might test for related to webinars, with good, screenshots and very specific examples, things that might not always pertain to some of your other just normal kind of email campaigns. And I thought it was interesting, not only from the fact that, virtual events are more important now than they have been in the past, maybe for a lot of us. So obviously we want to optimize them while we're in this environment, but on the flip side, thinking long term, like for a lot of companies, there's probably never going to be an opportunity to have this volume of sample data to test on.
Yeah.
So I think that, there's a lot of insight to be learned that you can then use, over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years even. So I thought that was a really interesting take on something that is, kind of current for a lot of us.
Mm. I was thinking about that with the volume as well too. You need to have a certain sample number to be able to start making actionable use. Even if you have one test, it's what do you do with the next test and next test. And this is one of those years where we have that. And I whenever I always think of that, I mean, I've heard Jessica Cow's presentation on A/B testing from a scientific method perspective quite a bit, right? And so I think that those are good resources to revisit, especially in a year like this.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you got her name right as well, and I didn't, so that's always good. I was moving on to there was a couple of open discussions actually, so I think Michael just touched on this briefly, but on the July 23rd there was the Atlanta open discussion. We also had Phoenix and Tuscan. Now I think, as Michael has said, that actually those are the opportunities to sort of bring your questions. If you have specific questions, there's often people that can answer them on that, and you get time dedicated to that, because it's always interesting what discussions actually come up in those. I didn't get a chance to attend those ones, but I don't know if anyone has any call outs for that, because there was some looking later down the line outside of the open discussions. There was things like the Raleigh and Durham MUG, which was also on the July 23rd, that had the drift presentation, which I think I've seen a couple of times now, but they only gave them a short slot, I believe, with also then Q&A. But I've seen that drift presentation a couple of times now, because I think it's coming up again in August with another mug. But my big call out actually is and I don't know if anyone else got a chance to attend this one, was the India virtual mug. Now they didn't actually have it on Bevy, but they had Arjun, who's the senior director for product management, and it's one of the best summations that I've had of the Marketo product roadmap in terms of the updates. And there was lots of technical questions coming up Arjun as well. I think they'll be releasing the recording of that on Bevy, so if you get a chance to check that out. That was done on July 29th, and it was done by the India Virtual Marketo User Group. So I've attended the Marketo Champion version. There's been the initial Marketo User Group one, but the India Virtual Mug stands out because there was a lot of technical questions flying at Arjun as well. So when that recording comes, and it will soon be on there, but I don't know did anyone else attend the Raleigh Durham Mug or the India Mug at all, or no?
I meant to attend the Indian one. I saw it promoted on LinkedIn, and I was
great.
like, "This is going to be great." But
it was really good.
Yeah.
Those guys never fail to kind of surprise me, it's one of my favorite user groups actually, and I've only attended maybe 2 or 3 now, but every time there's really good technical questions that are asked on there as well. So for the technical guys, that's definitely one to kind of catch. Even just little details about how it's affecting the URL structure for when they're building out the new user updates or the user interface for their documentation. So in answer to that, it's going to have a redirect. So if you've got product documentation or how to use your templates, it's not going to affect that. I just thought it was a kind of a good question that someone had asked in that India Virtual Marketo User Group as well. Just little things like that.
It'd be worthwhile to kind of bring up too, just for some context, right? If you haven't heard or you haven't been in any of the sessions too, that the India, or I guess Marketo has got some things on the product roadmap where there's going to be a transition from the current model where you have a Sky and the Marketo Sky environment and the Marketo Classic environment, for lack of a better word. And so that's part of what we're talking about here too, is that kind of going forward, the product roadmap showing that Marketo is going to start to have a little bit more of a closer alignment with the rest of the Adobe Experience Cloud. And what I love about this session too, and I haven't been to any of the India ones, it's a 12-hour time time zone difference from here, so that makes it challenging. But talking to Karan Hari, who is one of the co-leaders there and was our MUG ambassador in the virtual space about 2 years ago, they have a huge footprint of people who are developers, who are experts, who are working in the Marketo space there. So it's great that they have the ability to, anytime you can get insight directly from the product team, that's great. But kind of speaking to your earlier point about the virtual mugs, is virtual mugs are with the happy hours. Those are great places to be able to get in front of one or two or sometimes three or more champions that are in the community. So if you have questions about your Marketo instance, that's a good place to get sort of a compass to show you here's the right direction to travel to find a solution. So it's worth jumping into one of those just to be able to kind of get the ear of some of these really talented, experienced people that are coming at some of these problems. And it's also a good time, and it's a good place to kind of make some good friends and connections too for later on. Who knows, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. I mean, there's nothing else to say around the India mug, only that you should probably watch recording, especially if you have more of a technical background. But I also kind of just conscious of time as well, because we really wanted to talk about the experiencer makers just a little bit. But towards the end of their month, it was quite heavy. We had the Minneapolis Marketo User Group. So they did, I'm going to demolish another name, but it's probably Tribio presentation.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's just sort of got there. And they had a kind of a Q&A, current challenges. Anyone attend that one?
Yeah, both Michael and I attended it. This one was interesting because most of the other mugs and so forth, besides the happy hours, are kind of like in the evenings. They're kind of interested in kind of how that works and stuff, but most seem to be kind of like a lunch and learn format. Minneapolis, or the Twin Cities, they actually held it at 8:30 local time, a.m., which was 7:30 my time. So I thought it was quite interesting. It was like the beginning of the day type of meeting. So I thought it was really, I don't know if any other mugs are doing it that way, but I thought it was interesting from a timing standpoint, more than anything else. Kind of getting kicked back up again a little bit along those lines. They've been kind of dormant for a little bit, but they're moving along pretty quickly. The presentation with Tribio was great. They talked about, I mean, it was probably just me just not being completely awake at that time in the morning, but they talked about ABM and stuff, and putting Tribio kind of in the same kind of a tech, so more tech category, like an Engagio type of a deal with ABM, but they really weren't. They're looking at how you can do ABM marketing through your on-site, or your orchestrating your account-based marketing against really kind of your ads and stuff, like through LinkedIn or Facebook or other things along those lines, and how you can actually extend your ABM model and structure into online digital advertising more than anything else. And so it took me about half the presentation to kind of also connect the dots and the lights come on for a minute, because I was thinking, like I said, I box them into like an Engagio or other ABM type of a tool, whereas they're kind of more along kind of more the digital advertising type of perspective. But that being said, it was really good. I mean, they talked about things from, kind of what it includes to be a high performing ABM strategy, to, how you can target the right audience and the type of intent data, and kind of using multi approaches to your ABM perspective, rather than just kind of looking at, kind of a certain type of a list across the board. And just kind of, they kind of use a big word, kind of orchestration is kind of a big thing they used from a standpoint. But overall, I think it was really good. They did a lot good about kind of presentation, kind of education element, and kind of with that digital marketing and elements along those lines, rather than saying, hey, here's what Tribio does, and then at the end they kind of talk about what they do. So, which is good, which is typical of, hopefully most vendors do that, right? Kind of talk about the challenges and needs. Of course, hopefully that relates to kind of how they came into the market space and how they're part of the element. And then, of course, there was not quite a few, so we had quite a good time to actually asking some detailed Q&A along from that standpoint. And then they had some giveaways as well, and at the end from that standpoint. So I think it was pretty good. So
I want to jump in on the Q&A because really you did great on that Q&A, Trent. I think so. There's something to be said here too about the Marketo User Group. So A lot of them run either on a presentation model with Q&A or an open forum where anybody can come with different questions. And this was one of the former types. A lot of great things happening in Twin Cities. They're shifting to a new Marketo User Group leader. The old one was there, and we have a good relationship, but Christina stepping down, and so I am very encouraged by what I see coming out of that user group in terms of new content that's coming up. But I do want to call out you, Mr. Cross, for asking some very good questions. Actually, you had a very good point about.
I was awake at that time finally after about 45 minutes.
So Triblio, one of the things they're using Bombora data directly into their product, which is interesting. But you asked a really good question about IP address tracking, given that we're all working from home now. And can you really get account-based information if everybody's completely distributed out in terms of their geographic locations? And then the other question that came up in that Q&A is that there's questions about how Google Chrome is going to be able to handle cookie tracking in the next year or two. And both of those are significant challenges for being able to map back to your ICP and who those accounts are going to match back to. And I don't know that we have the time to go into details about all the answers, but I know that those answers are on the recording, and I'm grateful that you asked the question and brought that up, and to kind of hear Eduardo kind of respond back on that and talk about the platform and how they're addressing that is really interesting, and it's good for marketers to watch that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm going to watch a recording of that one. I also want to the last one on the list that we haven't spoken about is just the Silicon Valley Marketo User Group. Now, I only caught the Q&A of that where Jess had her daughter on and the answer was always Marketo. And I think she's like 5, all right? When sometimes that could be true, right? When you're dealing with some field marketers, maybe, but I don't know. But yeah, did anyone catch the beginning of that session on the because I caught the Q&A. But
yes, that was Amanda Thomas going through engagement programs, but more from a segmentation side of things. And so, just talking a little bit about how segmentations work. How do you match across them? What is a meaningful dimension to be able to segment off of, and what are some ones that you might want to avoid per se, that just don't give you any results about your customer base or your person record. And it's always interesting to see how they're kind of organizing the different streams, by personas and by cadences as well too. So you were at that one too, right, Trent?
I was, yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, echo everything you said. Amanda did a great job. I mean, she kind of walked them through kind of why you do it, what's the purpose of, kind of here's some ideas and strategies, kind of like what should be done, kind of once again give people a variety along those lines, and then basically she called it her step by step. She says that she's very tactical. She's like steps 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's kind of how her presentation was set up from that standpoint. And just kind of how to build and apply those and some examples along those lines, kind of how the dynamic context segmentation came into play for that standpoint and across the board. The other thing I thought was kind of interesting about the Santa Clara Silicon Valley one is that it's quite a large group, but there's lots of people who are non-Silicon Valley attendees. So I saw people from, not just Scott Michael and myself there, but also from other parts of the country and other parts of the world that were attending and stuff. And so they might be in that kind of a sweet spot time zone, but yeah, they had pretty good from that standpoint. And then, like I said, they had the Q&A afterwards, right? That you talked with Warren, right, with Jessica's daughter popping in with the purple shirt on and the plant wall behind her and stuff, and that she was talking about, but yeah, I think it was overall had some pretty good conversation discussion at the end as well. And Amanda did a great job. I mean, so she's her presentations are really good and pretty straightforward.
That plant wall thing, that was on the Adobe Experience Makers thing, wasn't it? I remember checking back into an hour, and she was like an hour in, or was it half an hour, or I don't know. I watched that on the Experience Makers, and that was a weird one. But I do want to touch on that Experience Makers presentations, because there's someone on this call, Adele, who was presenting there, and I messaged Adele and I said, "Oh, I think this is amazing," and Adele goes, "Well, no, this is basic bitch." That was her comment today, which I mentioned briefly, but I thought it was really good, really engaging. And it's interesting because on the experience makers presentations, they are presentations that you could have seen before if you'd attended other Marketo user groups. You've heard people like Jules and Chelsea speak before, things like that, but they are consolidated into one place in a full overview as well. So like a full dedicated slot, and they've got all the recordings now live as well. So there is Adele presented there. How did you find that, Adele? Was it, I mean, did you have to do much prep?
They gave a lot of prep. They really did think about it. So they had producers, they had digital checks. You had to get your content signed off. They gave you guidance on your content as well. So they did want the content I presented to be introductory, which is why I have been saying basic bitch when speaking privately with Warren, I may add. So they did want it to be accessible for all, hence the content. But they were, from start to finish, there was always someone there. So it really didn't feel like you were just taking part in just a quick check-in or a quick virtual user group. It was a full event that had been curated from start to finish. So the platform was really robust. We're actually talking about using it internally here as well. And it was an official producer. He was a television producer, which was absolutely terrifying because you had to sit and listen to your pre-recorded presentation, which is 15 minutes long. And then it cuts to you just sat in your home office, just like hoping that someone was watching it and is going to put a question in. And he counts you in. Yeah. So I was absolutely terrified. I was glad it was done when it finished.
And I did hear that Andy, who I work with, she did say that we were asking about how many did presentation as well, but there was something crazy, like 45,000 plus people have registered for this event, right? And so, yeah, that can be quite terrifying.
It was a lot. I mean, we're very lucky in the London user group that we have one of the Marketo managers that is kind of part of our organisational crew and our Marketo rep. She has done a lot of research into how the event went. And she is going to present that on our next session, which I think is the end of August, maybe the 20th, because we're actually trying to do a focus on how, everyone's a bit tired of webinars, what's next. So she's got some really good insight, but they actually saw, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but then, they don't know where I live. They actually saw a better engagement with this event than they did with their original summit that happened when they changed that to virtual. So they were really, really happy with how it turned out, because I think it went a lot better than they did expect it to.
Yeah, I can see that as well too. I having spoken the original summit one, the numbers were definitely different in this one. I think the other thing too about this one is that, we mentioned Jules and Chelsea's session, and they are scheduled to speak at the North American Virtual MUG in August. So because you have a limited time on these, on Summit Online and on the Adobe Experience Makers session, if you want to see a prolonged version of that presentation and kind of get a little bit deeper into content, and you have Q&A, watch for the mugs coming up in the next several weeks. I'm sure you'll see a lot of those presentations that'll be there. And the beauty about seeing that is that you can watch the Adobe Experience Maker presentations, take notes on some of the things that were presented there, and then go in and actually have like a live chat with somebody, right? So, how many times have you been on stage or watch somebody speak at a giant auditorium and said, I want to go talk to those people, I have so many other things I want to ask them afterwards. And the Marketo user groups are really one of the few places where you sort of democratize the way to have that conversation so that you can go up and talk to those people, get somebody like Adele's ear to be able to actually have a back and forth and learn at a deeper level other than what's on the slides.
Yeah, I think the only bit for me was 15 minutes, whilst it seems like a lot once you sit down and you actually look at the breadth of the topic you were kind of assigned. Mine was a repeat of what I was supposed to be doing at Summit before it went virtual. I had to cut a large proportion out of it, change the title, and really just try and cram in as much as possible. And as someone that speaks fast, but with quite a strong accent, usually if I'm speaking fast, it was quite hard to try and just be that, put together person that could get it in 15 minutes. But they did do a slight bit of editing, to be frank, with my recording. It sounded a lot more polished than me just sat in my home office just trying to get it out before a Friday night drink session. So they were very helpful that way with that kind of stuff, and there was a lot of guidance, but it was still, when you're sat on your own staring at a computer screen answering questions, it's utterly terrifying.
I know I'm going to make it big when I can get Morgan Freeman to voice over my sessions and basically speak on my behalf. That's the ultimate goal, is I want him to kind of be my voice. So your session, we had to trim a lot of ours when we were speaking at Adobe Summit in the spring as well too, with Christina Zuniga and I. But when you're speaking at the Marketo one, then is your plan to kind of present the full deck at the MUG meeting in a couple of weeks when you're presenting at that?
I'm actually not presenting at it, so I'm just going to be organising it. So we're just going to be looking at what we should be doing next after webinars. So we're just trying to get a supplier confirmed very close, so that's how to do more kind of engaging platform events instead of just webinars. And then we'll have Kate from Adobe who will be speaking about the stats behind the Experience Makers Live. And then we just kind of have a general bring a drink, let's have a chat, let's see what everyone's got situation going on, and we just try and cram that into an hour really. So we're not eating into people's evenings too much.
I think the other thing I want to mention just briefly, and cognizant that we have limited time, is that there's a difference between what happened at Marketo, or at the Adobe Summit, and the Experience Makers, in the sense that there's you're getting broader content as well too. And I was just looking at some of the recordings that were there as well too, and they're talking about how to handle leadership in the time of crisis. Talking about customer journeys, talking about some of the issues that are happening, not necessarily from a technical standpoint and how you deal with do this or this or this on any given technical platform, but what do we do from a marketing communication standpoint, given all of the things that are happening in the media cycle over the past 6 months, or in our lives in general, that we're all working from home, et cetera, et cetera. And so, these are, I'm grateful that they have a balance of pieces as well too, to be able to help give us some guidance on, here are some of the thought leadership perspectives on how to be able to kind of navigate our brands through some potentially very tumultuous times. So I think those are important to kind of see from that standpoint.
And interestingly, if you go to the recording and then filter by product and Marketo, it gives you not just the ones that we're familiar with, like Adele's session, Chelsea's session, with Jules, Andy, and Brooke, and Jessica Cow, but it also gives you those other sessions as well, where it becomes applicable. So I played around with that as well. But I didn't get a chance yet to watch some of those recordings, but they are now available on the adobe.com /events/experience-makers-live, I believe. So yeah, go and check those out if you get a chance. Marketo product roadmap, and then I just want to touch on this as well, because I know we talked about the India virtual mug where they actually had a highlight on it, but I believe that some of the content is going to be making its way into the user groups, because they've been very open. They want to reach out into the communities there, to ask lots of questions of them. But the bit that I did want to highlight on that product roadmap is they are adding a feedback button when the UX does sort of make its way into various systems. They're doing a slower rollout, but I mean, there's that to mention, is that feedback button. But I don't know if anyone else wants to call out anything that they've heard, seen in terms of content for the product roadmap, or even if they've been privy to one of the ones that they rolled out first.
I think it was, I was part of the one they did for the MUG leaders and stuff, which I thought was really good. But it was kind of interesting. I was taking frantic notes, right? I mean, because there's lots of stuff that are happening there. I think the biggest thing that kind of caught my attention, not just from a feature standpoint, but just that they reiterated 3 times that this is not a beta program. It's not a new feature functionality. It's a whole new UX UI rollout, and that everybody, he said about 80% plus of the customers currently using Marketo today will actually have it by the end of this year. And then they had some beta customers, quote-unquote, beta customers testing it right now, like 6 or 8 of them. And they went out to 400 additional customers. And then, by September, and a lot more by November and by December, right? They're looking at 80+% coverage by the end of the year. So to me, that means that obviously that this is not like a trial and error type of thing that Sky has been a little bit, but it's more from a standpoint, it's like, this is the way it is, and we're moving down this path. And then that goes back to what you're saying, Warren, right, in regards to why there's a feedback button there, because they want real-time feedback. But it's not like this test period anymore for like the last 2.5 years. They just basically say, this direction we're going, and we're making it happen. And then, like I said, there's lots of really cool things out of it. I mean, and I think going back to what you both were saying before is that I think they're wanting to go out and visit and participate and talk to customers as much as possible over the next 2 or 3 or 4 months. And so I would be surprised if a lot of the mugs and the virtual mugs will have guest speakers from Marketo for the product team over the next 2 or 3 or 4 months, and we'll have kind of a repeat of all that stuff. But I think it's good to have that information, because they'll start getting more and more information across the board. But yeah, that was the piece that caught me, other than just the features, functionality, just kind of direction that they're taking the product and what they wanted to do to make it more parity, to make it more like the Adobe shell structure they talked about several times, to bring it all into place with regard to the whole Adobe family type of structure across the board. And then, and then there's just lots of other cool things along those lines, but I think we're all going to learn that over the next several months, right? So
I think there's some points to be made here too, pragmatically, about the current situation that we're in right now with parallel experiences, and sort of why it's good to go through this transition right now. And if you've worked in Sky and you've worked in Marketo Classic, if you will, you can see that there are some functionalities that are available in Sky, being able to kind of do multiple program activations, being able to kind of access predictive audiences coming forward. But then there are other things that I think there's some flow steps, if I remember correctly, that aren't available in Sky yet. And the new experience is going to really allow you to basically hit a toggle button and kind of seamlessly move from one experience to the next from an aesthetic standpoint. And the other thing to kind of mention in here is there's a lot of testing that's being done in advance, with commercial clients that have opted into this, so that if you're running an enterprise instance, don't worry, there's going to be some consultation. Basically, they're not going to just flip the platform on you as an enterprise instance right away. That's a very thought out process, kind of like Trent said, for the migration over. But at the end of the day, that unified experience allows us to take advantage of some of the other things, some of the technology that's been discussed about, Adobe Sensei and AI technologies, and you really have to get a unified experience so that it's easier to develop and incorporate a lot of those features into the new Marketo as it's developing down the product roadmap.
Yeah, no, I was just, sorry, I was going to say, I wonder if they're going to appreciate my sarcasm with that feedback button. That's probably a no, but I just need to be conscious of that. Trent had to drop because they were at the top of we're coming up to that hour mark, but the bits that I do want to call out is just the next user groups for the next month, particularly like is someone from the London Marketo User Group that is on the 20th. That's coming up soon. All of these are still virtual. We have August 6th, we have the Bozeman Marketo User Group. August 19th, Indianapolis Marketo User Group. They've got Drift presentation on that. Something I do want to check in on is definitely August 20th, which is the Seattle Marketo User Group. They're doing a big piece on A/B testing. That's my favorite part of Marketo, and just testing on that. And then other sessions as well is August 20th, we've got another Houston mug. That is one of the ones that are quite a regular drumbeat. And they've got centralize your data and enable marketing ops innovation. So that'd be an interesting one to go on. And then finally, kind of, we've got the North America. They're always a virtual mug as well, like our EMEA one, but they've got sales and marketing alignment. And you called that out earlier, Michael, with the Chelsea and Jules presenting on that. And then finally, on August the 27th, we've got the Texas Marketo User Group, where they've got actually a Marketo quiz. So depending if I've had a few gin and tonics, I might, attend that one, see how that one goes. See if maybe there's a prize. Who knows? Maybe it's like a pub quiz. I have no idea, but I might attend that one as well. Also, and this is only kind of other comments. I'm just conscious of people's time. Is anyone else any thoughts or any things they want to call out? No. Okay, no, I just want to thank everyone for this kind of discussion, and we'll put out the recording, so that's perfect. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, if you like the recording, by the way, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, click the subscribe button and add us in. We can't wait to see you guys.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on. Thanks.
Thanks, Adele. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.